Server-side rendering, or SSR, has been dramatically improved in Angular over the last few releases. And by taking advantage of the latest best practices, you can completely revolutionize the way that you build and serve your Angular applications. Hi, my name is Stephen Fluin. Today we're going to be taking a look at two parts of an application process. First, we're going to build a brand new application using the Angular CLI and the SSR flag to take advantage of all the latest and greatest capabilities and controls that you have when building pre-rendered, server-side rendered, and client-rendered applications in this hybrid mental model that we've got. Second, we'll go ahead and take a look at the fastest way to get that application up onto the internet, served out to millions of users, while still taking advantage of all those SSR and pre-rendering capabilities. Let's go ahead and get started. Today we are going to go ahead and start things on the command line so that we can show off all of the options that you have when creating a brand new project. So let's go ahead and run npx at angular/CLI. At latest, we're going to say the new command, and we're going to throw -- minimal on this just to make the demo simple as possible. And let's go ahead and call this an SSR demo, or server-side rendering demo. We're going to ask what sort of styling we want to use. Let's go ahead and say yes. And this is actually the most important question here, where it's asking us, do we want to enable server-side rendering and static site generation? And so for the purposes of this demo, we absolutely do want that. Let's go ahead and follow the latest best practices and make it zoneless. And then in case we want Copilot to be helping us out a little bit, let's go ahead and give it the Copilot AI instructions. So this project is going to be scaffolded. All of the dependencies are going to be installed from NPM. And very momentarily, we should have a working project using the kind of hello world template that is minimal. So let's cd into the folder and take a look at what we've got. So if we hit code, we will go ahead and see our VS Code here. Close out of agent mode. We'll see all the normal source files that we're expecting. And if I run npm run start, we should also see this project running on port 4200. And so if we take a look in the browser, we will see this is welcome to SSR demo. This is the simplest Angular application that you can have. And a lot of this is going to look very, very similar to you. So you're going to have source, app, all these sorts of things. And in order to demonstrate a few of these principles, what we're going to do is we're going to use the schematics to generate a few components for us. Okay, so let's go ahead and cd into this SSR demo folder, and then we can use npx ng generate component. You can also just use G and C, and we're going to make a home component for our application. We're going to go ahead and make an about component for our application and an admin component. So these are just super simple components. If we take a look in each of these, it's just going to be a about works, admin works, and home works. And then in order for our application to actually work, let's go ahead and create a few different routes for these. So we'll pull up our app.routes.ts, and let's go ahead and give it a few paths. So we're going to give it the default, which is instead of redirecting to home, we're going to say load component. And let's import the home component, and we're following the new standards where instead of calling it home component, it's just called home, which is just fine. We have that first path. Now let's go ahead and two more paths. So we've got our about path, and then we should have our admin path is going to be our last path that we're going to add. All right, and with that, we should have three individual routes on our application. And in order to make this really easy to see and understand what's going on, I'm going to go ahead in the angular.json file and turn on one of my favorite settings in the build options here, both for development mode and for production mode. So we've got production configuration here, and we're going to go ahead and turn on named chunks to true. We'll do that both here in dev mode as well as in development mode, because it's not too much of a security risk informing users or developers what your chunks are. And if we take a look at our application, maybe we go into our app.ts file and we add in some links. We could say a router link equals there, and we'll call this the home one, and then we'll make an admin and an about one. So if we take a look at our application, we should now see home. Oops, we've got router link. We need our router link import here. All right, we now have home, about, and admin. Now, one of the files that you might have noticed when we were searching was this brand new app.routes.server.ts. And this is kind of where the magic of server-side rendering ends up starting.
as well as the second file that you might have noticed is this server.ts. So let's go ahead and start in the server.ts file. What this is a Node application that is compiled down from the TypeScript that you see here, built on top of Express, that is intelligent enough to serve your Angular application in the right way. And what I mean by that is if the file is static on the disk, it will just render it directly to the browser. We can see here we've got the browser disk folder, and it's just serving those up as static files via Express. You also have all other application requests coming in and actually booting up your Angular application, figuring out what's all the state, all the executing everything, and then serving that rendered version of the application down to the server or down to the user. And one of my favorite parts here is that this is a full Express application, and so you can create your own little routes. So let's make a little hello world API, and now we've got API/hello from the API. And what's really, really nice about server-side rendering and this server hybrid style with the Angular development environment is all of this actually just kind of works in a single environment. And so if I go /API/hello, we can see our API coming through perfectly here. And so in this server.ts, you're getting everything you need for a server-side or pre-rendered application, as well as the ability to serve up client-side rendered versions of the application. But how do I actually control how that works? And the magic here is in that app.routes.server.ts file that I mentioned. So much like you're defining routes in your app.routes file, the app.routes.server file allows you to specify what mode you want to use for which routes. And so, for example, I by default maybe want to do a server-side rendering for anything I don't specify. But then I will go ahead and specify that for the home screen, I want to do pre-render. And then maybe for the admin path, I want to do client-side only, because maybe there's some user state that I don't want to worry about hydration on. So we'll go render mode, and instead of pre-render, we'll say client. And now when we build our application and when we actually take a look at it, even in dev mode, we will see that all of this is actually automatically taking effect. And so if I go hit view page source, and we take a look at some of the source here, we're actually going to see home works, which means we know we're on the home page, and that because of our definition of our route config is going to be rendered on the server. Similarly, if we'd selected pre-render, this would be pre-rendered out. But then if you take a look, for example, at our admin route, this works via client-side click. But if we view the source again of that client-side click, what we're going to see is that admin page is not being rendered at all. It's just sending down the JavaScript and then bootstrapping it, and everything works exactly as you might expect. We can also take a look at this from a build standpoint. So let's go ahead and run an npx ng build. And what is this going to do? This is going to create a dist folder /SSR demo for our project, as you can see here. And in here, you're going to have a browser folder that's going to have all of the pre-rendered files, all of the things that we might need to send down to a browser in terms of static. And so you can see here we've got that index.html file. If we set another of our paths in our application to pre-render, so let's imagine we do that with the about path. When we run an ng build, what we should see here is the addition of an about.html file. So let's just go ahead and run that build and take a look and make sure that we're seeing that file. Here we have that /about file, that folder, and an index.html. This is just a standard way of serving that path because a lot of the hosting providers know how to serve an index.html file in a folder, and it avoids any namespace conflicts. So with that, with our server.ts and our server.routes, we now have a fully working server-side rendered application, and things are kind of just going to work automatically, right? I can choose what type of rendering I want on each of my routes of my application. If I make an HTTP request, it's going to automatically use transfer state, all these sorts of things. If we take a look at a hydrated version of our application, so let's take a look at, for example, our server-side rendered or our pre-rendered home screen. Let's go back to home. We have to actually have a server running here. So if we go ahead and take a look back at our home screen of our application, and once again, we take a look at that view source, we're not only going to see all the static HTML, but we're also going to see this transfer state. So this is what enables the hydration to work kind of magically. So at this point, I have an application, I can build it, and I could throw it on a server somewhere and figure out how to execute it. But I want to also show in the second half of this demo how to do this super simply with Firebase App Hosting. So what we're going to do is we're going to X out of this. We're going to make sure that we have Firebase-tools installed. So you can always install it with npm i-g Firebase tools. Make sure you have the latest version of those tools. And then we're going to run a simple Firebase init command once we have this. All right, Firebase tools installed now. Let's go ahead and use Firebase init, and it's going to ask us what we want to initialize, and I'm going to say app hosting. So set up deployments for full stack web apps, including SSR support. We can choose what we want to. I've already authenticated with the Firebase tool in this account, but you'd be asked to authenticate via web browser. And let's go ahead and create a new project, and we'll call it SSR demo. Oh, we've already used that name, so let's give it a new name, SSR Demo 76, per the recommendation. We'll give it the same name here. It's going to go ahead and create the Firebase project. It's going to create a Google Cloud Platform project to power it and to back it. And then what we'll see is this is actually going to error out because the Firebase App Hosting does not work in the purely free plan, but it is covered by the free tier. And what do I mean by that? So let's go ahead and jump into the console URL it gives us here and go directly into the project we just created. And it's asking us to update the billing plan. So we're on the no cost Spark plan. I'm just going to switch this to the pay as you go Blaze plan. And as I said before, the tier that I have seen Firebase App Hosting using for any small or even medium applications completely fits in with the free tier. Despite having dozens of these applications, I've never paid for any app hosting. So let's go ahead and enable that cloud billing. And we are almost done here. So we can run the Firebase init command, which will finish that initialization of the app hosting. And now that we have a compatible Firebase project that it set up for us with the billing set correctly. And it's going to ask us next if we want to create a backend. This is really just the instance where it's going to be both building our application as well as serving our application. And so we'll need to give that backend a little bit of a name as well. So we're going to create a new backend, and we'll just pick a region for it, and then we'll call it SSR demo. And then this is going to finish in the background. You can also see this backend directly in the Firebase experience here. So if we just go to app hosting, what we should see is all of our configuration for app hosting in the Firebase console. So we've got this SSR demo, and you'll notice it is waiting for our first deployment. Oh, we need to finish the configuration here. So yeah, I just said, yeah, the apps root is / which is exactly where we are now. You could set that to something else if you're in a deeper folder. So everything seems to have worked. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and connect this out to a Git repository, because this will actually give us a couple superpowers. So git remote add origin, and then I have a path here. And I'm going to just force push over any other sample code I might have had in the past. Perfect. Now, first let's set up auto push. So what we can do is we can go to deployment, and then it will use my Firebase app hosting connection to GitHub in order to automatically build our application every time we push to main. So I'm just going to go ahead and give it these permissions. We'll use my GitHub user account that I've already got installed. And if you don't have permissions, you can go ahead and add permissions just by scrolling down, grant access to a new repository. You can see I've got a few repositories I've already granted access to. So we'll just pick the repository we just pushed to. We'll say that this is going to be the main branch, and we will save and deploy. So this is now configured for automatic deployment. So whenever we do a push, it will attempt to create a rollout and actually deploy this all the way to the domain name that it has selected here. So we can see backend not found, so it is waiting for our first release. We can trigger our first release by just making a commit. So let's just say initial sample code. We'll go ahead and commit that and push that up. Firebase App Hosting will automatically notice that there's been a push, and it should start a cloud build of our application. as well as as soon as that build is complete, that application will start running in the background and be doing all the things that we just talked about in terms of client-side rendering, server-side rendering, pre-rendering, as well as responding to any requests that are hitting an API. And so this is super magic for me. And then one of my favorite things to do is to just go into settings, hit domains, and go ahead and add a custom domain. So you can add whatever you want. So maybe it's ssr.fluent.io, and then it will go ahead and try and set up that domain name. It'll mint the certificate, things like that. I found that if, depending on your hosting provider, you can just kind of skip it and hit need setup. And what will happen is it will come back in a moment with an A record, a text record, and a CNAME record that you just pop into your DNS. And then your fully configured domain name will work and host your application live. If you want to follow along with the process, you can go back to the Google Cloud that we were in, looking at both the cloud builds where you can monitor all the steps of the build, as well as going to Cloud Run to see what's going on with the actual running of the application. So one of the nice things about Cloud Run that is being used under the hood by the app hosting within Firebase is that it's actually doing true rollouts where you can look at different revisions of your application and it will move it from 0% traffic out to another revision with 100% traffic. And so you can actually do things like roll out the new version of your application to 10% of your users or 20% of users. So there's a lot of very advanced things you can do here. So let's go ahead and refresh this application. And we see now we have welcome to SSR demo. We can see our pre-rendering at work. We can see our client-side rendering, hybrid rendering, all the different sorts of features that we want. And you'll also notice that all of that is coming through perfectly as a client-side application, just like you would expect from a standard Angular app. So with that, we've been completely successful with SSR and getting things up online and available to everyone very, very quickly and very, very easily. We've just built a brand new Angular application from scratch using SSR and then deployed that Angular application all the way to Firebase App Hosting, getting us online and taking advantage of the latest and greatest very quickly. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.